Yo, what is going on YouTube? It's How's the Gold here with a video today that's slightly unusual, and it's going to be the start of a new series that I'm putting out on YouTube. It's going to be F1 comparison to the world. I mean, I was bored yesterday and couldn't be asked to do a revision, so I thought I'd come up with a new series to put onto YouTube, and this is what I came up with. It's basically a series where I'm going to compare F1 to other things around the world. This could be football, it could be pizza, it could be food, it could be houses, it could be car manufacturers, it could be basically anything. So make sure you subscribe if you feel interested in that, and also leave a comment and let me know what you would like to see next. Please feel free to like or dislike the video. If you dislike, I would appreciate if you could also leave a comment and let me know why you don't like the video. But anyway, let's get into the video. Now, I'll compare the Red Bull to Spain as football teams, because basically Red Bull are currently up there, they're one of the best teams along with Spain in the football world. So they're both up there, however they're both not as good as their predecessors. So Red Bull is nowhere near as good as the Ferrari, say the 2000 season, and Spain is nowhere near as good as Brazil in the 1990s, which is why they've still got their improvement to go, and they can't beat the old classics, but I think they're very close, but they're very closely related also in football and F1 terms. But they're just not there, but they're very good at what they do. Spain may be slightly more boring than Red Bull, because Red Bull have some overtaking to do, but they're still dominant car, while Spain just passed the ball around and just put it in the back of the net. Next, I've compared Ferrari to Germany. This because they're both there always to take up the points. I mean, if Red Bull slip up, Ferrari are always there. They've been there from the start as well, and so is Germany. So they've both been there, but they're not as good as Spain or as good as Red Bull. But they're close, they're very similar, but they're just not quite there at the moment. So they're very good though, they're both near the top of their game. Like with Massa and Alonso, they're both coming very similar, like lap times, they're both very close to Red Bulls as well, qualifying second and third. But anyway, next on we have got McLaren. And I'll compare McLaren to Brazil. Now this is a very difficult one for me to decide, because Brazil is a very good team like McLaren, but they've also faded away. I mean, if you've noticed in the last 5 or 6 years, Brazil are nowhere near as good as they used to be. You know, Ronaldinho, Kaká, and Pepe. They're not as good as they are now. But along with McLaren, I mean, they're not as good as where they were with say Hamilton and Button. Well, Hamilton has recently just left. They're still not as good, and they're very closely related. In that sense, they're both fading away. Hopefully McLaren could turn it around, and also Brazil, because I like both teams, but I hope they could do slightly better on, but they're fading away at the minute, which is why I compare them together. Next I've compared Lotus to Holland. This because they're both upcoming. I mean, Raikkonen won the first race of the season. Now Holland are also doing well in the Football League, in terms of rankings, because they're coming up quite strong. I think they're in 4th or 5th at the minute. But they've got a little bit of work to do, but they get their tactics right almost every time. They're very close to beating the other teams. I mean, they may have even beaten Germany or like Spain once or twice, but they're not as good as them in my opinion. They can have one-off games where they're slightly better, and Lotus are also slightly better than Red Bull, but not very often. I mean, you usually see Red Bull on top, because if you look at Australia, it was Raikkonen first. But Red Bull was I can't remember, 3rd or 4th or something. But they're very close. But I think Red Bull have had the upper hand, unless tyre wear comes into it near the end of the Grand Prix, which is why I compared Lotus with Germany, Holland even, my bad. Mercedes and next, now I've compared them to Portugal. This because Mercedes are very capable of getting a win. They're probably going to get a few wins this season over Portugal, over big clubs. I mean, Portugal, they could possibly win over Brazil, and they could possibly win over Spain if they really put their heart into the game, with Ronaldo and all his teammates as well. And then also, if you look at Mercedes, they finished 3rd and 4th in Malaysia, and they're very strong for the win. And I think if they had them not starting Inters, I think they would have run the race, because Red Bull struggled with their tyres too much, so I think they would have actually won the race. So that's why I compare them together. They're both they're both capable, but they're just not quite there yet, and they'll have the potential later on this year. Next, I compared Sauber to Sweden. Because Sauber, on their good day, they have a really good day. I mean, compared to Brazil of 2012, Sauber were right up there with Nico Hülkenberg. They were guaranteed to win the race if he hadn't skidded into Button or Hamilton. But basically, they were up there. They were very close. They were in contention for the win. Maybe just once or twice. They got quite a few podiums as well, along with Sweden, who had a few highlights around the season. Because they beat England 4-2 with the absolutely spectacular goal from Ibrahimovic, that overhead kick. You probably find loads of versions of it on YouTube. And I think they have some good moments, but they have some really bad moments. But I think overall they are very similar. And then next I have compared Force India to Belgium. This is because they don't have the greatest players, Belgium, and neither Force India have the greatest team or the greatest car. But they still end up doing fairly well. I mean, they get into the finals to Belgium. They just don't proceed anywhere. That's what sort of Force India do. They get into the points with Adrian Sutil, but they fade away, but they still remain in the points. If you look at Australia, Adrian Sutil, he got into 7th place by the end of the Grand Prix. But he was leading. So they sort of get into the points, but they don't really get up high into the points without falling back down again. Belgium beat England, but then they fell 6-0 to Paraguay. Yeah, so I don't know why, but they're just very similar. They can't get high up in the rankings. We kept saying to the top 20 in football and the top 10 in F1. Excuse me, but they just can't get anywhere at the minute. So I compared them together because they get into the points where they just can't really proceed up in the point standings. Next, I compared Williams to Poland. Now this is slightly odd, you say, but Poland are a really bad team. Williams have won a race. But if you think about it, if you look at the Poland/Ukraine championship, Poland was able to have a really good match with England, and they were able to get on level terms and probably play for the win. And that's what Williams was able to do in 2012. They won the race with Pastor Maldonado and got lots of top 10 finishes with Senna. So they're up there. They have the potential, but they just don't exceed it very often. If you had 10 games England v Poland, you'd expect England to win maybe 8 or 9 of them, and Poland to win maybe 1, which is sort of what the points and wins are like for Williams. If you give them 10 races, then maybe expect to win 1, and they're finishing the points or just out of the points in the next 9 or so. So basically, they're a good team, but they have to have the right conditions at the right time. Poland, it was played in Poland, so they had the home support as well against England, which is why they probably did better. And Spain, Maldonado had the backing of Venezuela GP, well, not GP but Venezuela, which gave them a lot of income and chance to win, which is why they are basically where they are. So the main reason I've compared Williams to Poland is because they're in the right conditions, in the right way, they can exceed any other team. If every match was played at Poland, I'm sure Poland would be much higher up in the world rankings than they are today, and probably be as good as Brazil. But that can't happen, obviously, because it wouldn't be fair. Anyway, moving on, I compared Toro Rosso to Ukraine. Now this is because Ukraine and Toro Rosso, they've both got good teams, but they look like they've got a good team and everything, and then they play and it's just not there. Toro Rosso, the car looks good to drive, but there's no pace in it. It's alright driving and getting around the laps consistently. But if you haven't got the pace to keep up, there's no point actually doing it. And then Ukraine, they play games, they're fairly consistent, but they don't win a lot. The only reason they got into the championships in 2012 is because they were hosting it. And obviously, the host has to take part, otherwise it's not really fair. That's not right in my opinion either. But, they've got some talent, but they just can't put it down into the pitch. They can't actually get around and score too many goals. The same Toro Rosso, they can't score very many points, but the car looks there. Everything looks set and ready I mean, they could be up challenging, say, McLaren at this current time, but they're just not there. They haven't got the pace to keep up, when it looks like they do so much. I mean, Q1 when they come out, they look fast because they're the first cars to normally set at that. But the pace isn't there. The same with the Ukraine team, unfortunately. Next, I compared Marussia to Scotland and Caterham to Wales. Now this is because Scotland and Wales are both very close to making it into the finals. More Marussia closer to getting into the points than Caterham, which is why I compared Marussia to Scotland and Caterham to Wales. Because Scotland, I think they were about 2 points away from proceeding into the championships, but they just didn't get there, unfortunately, which is what Marussia were like. I think they finished 12th, which is just 2 points away, 2 places away from the points. And Scotland finished 2 points away from the championships, which is quite unfortunate, but hence the link between the two teams. And then I've ranked Caterham as Wales, because Wales were a bit further behind to get into the championship, but they were still there. They were fairly close. I think they came about 3rd or 4th in their group, but 6 or so points off the lead to proceed into the finals, which I think Caterham are, if you think about, in comparison to Marussia, they don't seem to have the pace at the minute. I mean, Bianchi's like finishing 40 seconds ahead of them at the end of the race, which means that he's obviously putting out a gap. But I mean, with Chilton, they're not putting out so much of a gap over him, and maybe that's just racecraft or whatever. But Caterham, I don't think have made as much progress as Marussia, hence I rank them lower down. But anyway, this has been my F1 versus football comparison. If you like, please make sure you obviously hit the like button. If you want to see more series like this, please make sure to subscribe, and also leave a comment, let me know what you'd like to see next. That's Gold with my F1 versus football comparison, and I'm out of here.